Welcome to Practically Magick. I am your host, Courtney Pearl, your Celtic folk witch and healer. And I am joined today by Tiffany Lazic, author, mystic, registered psychotherapist, spiritual director, certified divining techniques practitioner, specializing in spiritual psychotherapy, and author of the great work, Self-Knowledge and Healing Through the Wheel of the Year, The Noble Art, From Shadow to Essence Through the Wheel of the Year, and exciting upcoming book from Llewellyn, Psychopomps and the Soul, Traversing Death and Life for Healing and Wholeness. That's a mouthful. Thank you and welcome, Tiffany.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I know they're all a bit of a mouthful, aren't they?
It's great to have that list. In fact, I usually list off all of my titles and I'm like, you know what? Celtic folk witch is fine. Let's just stick with that for now. But yeah. You deserve all the accolades for that list. And you're here today. We met, so I'll just kind of briefly talk about when I joined the Sacred Sites pilgrimage for the Sisterhood of Avalon. Before I was in the sisterhood, me and my aunt, it was actually her that had been following the sisterhood for a while, and she messaged me and said, do you want to go on this trip? And I was like, this sounds exactly like what I'm looking for. Absolutely. I want to go. Never been out of the country before, just studying kind of, spirituality on my own. And then getting to go to the land of my ancestors was absolutely life-changing for me. And that's where I got to meet you. You were with us briefly on that trip. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we were discussing before we hit record how she had recently, at that point, moved to Wales and was like, I remember how excited you were to say, and I'm from here, Wales. And I was like, and it was that trip that from the very first day, from the day that we went to Wales and we spent one day there, I was like, something about this place is absolute magic. So it's almost like I get to reach through the internet, through the interwebs, and be connected to Wales for just a short period of time while you're here with me.
Yeah, the energy is all here, just right out the window. There's mountains, there's sea, there's sheep, just right there.
I know. I'm fangirling a little bit about seeing you, and I'm fangirling about Wales a little bit today. I'm just a little bit like all the things. So we usually start our episodes on Practically Magick pulling a card, and I'm going to pull one from the branches of the Celtic Tarot Christopher Hughes deck, which I actually only recently got a few months ago. I'm so excited to have.
It's a brilliant deck. It really is. I love it.
Love the artwork, and I love the connections to the mythology, the storytelling in the cards. So I'm going to pull a card for us today. Maybe you and me, maybe a little bit for our listeners. Whoever is listening maybe needs to hear what this card has to offer. Our card today is the Seven of Shields. I'm going to show it on the camera for those who are watching. Seven of Shields. It's kind of got that shadow of people. Kind of see almost like spiritual, mystical people in the background. This is when Math and Gwydion are summoning and spelling their magic to create Gwydion in the cauldron, so that she will be a wife to Thu in the mythology. I won't go all into the story, but stay tuned for my other storytelling episodes. But I do notice too that on this card there is like snow on the ground and snow in the background, and I know this card is kind of associated with prosperity, and even like in projects or business being able to manifest or bring forth what it is that you've worked really hard for, put a lot of effort into. So they put all the ingredients in, and they're going to make this woman out of flowers. And it also kind of serves as sort of a warning of like, be careful what you wish for, or be careful what you're bringing out, because it's probably going to take on a life of its own. make its own choices as well, right?
It feels very, if I can jump in a little bit, is
Please
it
do.
feels very, it feels alchemical, right? The two magicians over the cauldron,
Oh my
they
God.
put the ingredients in. You know, they're doing the work. It's very different than because I know that the Seven of Shields is equivalent to the Seven of Pentacles, which usually has this sense of sort of assessment, like stepping back and okay, so I've done a lot of work and now I need to step back and see what needs to stay, what needs to go. But with this one, it's they're like they put the ingredients in, and they're using their skill to create the alchemical transformation, which is going to turn these flowers into this woman. So I'm not sure that there could be a more perfect card for this episode.
Gosh, that's fantastic. What an amazing. And that's usually how it works, right? I mean, you just pull what is exactly right for that moment. I know for me, this is really kind of perfect for things that have been happening in my life the last week, where there's a lot of things I've been kind of struggling with and contemplating. And there's certain groups in my community that I've been a part of that I've been trying to uh, decide how much I really want to put my investment into, or maybe step back, pull back, and say, that's not where I want my energy to be right now. And so, just in the last few days, actually, I came up with these like epiphany moments where I'm like, oh my gosh, I see how my involvement in these things can actually improve it. That I could be a part of it and it could become something really, I'm really enthusiastic about. So
Right.
that's interesting. Taking like,
Yeah.
again, like that lead into gold kind of a thing.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. When two things come together, neither leaves unchanged as
Ooh,
well.
wow. Excellent. So did you have something you wanted to share with us in your divination tools?
I did. I was almost thinking, well, should I do it now or should I leave it for the end? But
Well, it's up to
yeah,
you. Whatever you want.
you know what? I almost kind of wanted, yeah, let's leave it till the end because I love
Okay.
that you have Math and Gwydion. It feels like they've kind of stepped in and they've set the laboratory. Like there's the cauldron. It's bubbling away. It's got the ingredients. It's in the process of transformation. So maybe if we have a bit of a chat and then I'll pull one at the end and see what it has
Down.
to say about the whole process. Let's see
Okay.
what comes out at the end of the bubbling.
Yeah. All right. So we're putting all of our ingredients into our cauldron here. And I just have to say, my experience with alchemy before diving into it, I'm not even sure why it was brought to my mind as I was thinking of what are some topics I'd like to cover this season in Practically Magic, and what are some things I want to talk about. Um, and I know my aunt who came with me on that pilgrimage, she had taken some of your courses on alchemy, and she kind of shared with me some of her notes or some things that she was learning when she was visiting me. And I thought, oh, this is interesting. I don't actually know anything about this.
All right.
And I I had read The Alchemist. I don't know how many people listening maybe are familiar with the book, the story, The Alchemist. And I read that, and the only other thing that I know about it is the uh, Discovery of Witches series or book. It started out as a book, but it's a TV series. And, they're looking for Ashmole something, something that has a spell written into it, whatever. And they're like, she's studying alchemy. And I'm like, what is she studying exactly? What is this? And I'm thinking, is it literal? Is it literally like people really were trying to, turn lead into gold? Or are we talking about something more spiritual or philosophy? Is it science? So help us, for those of us who, maybe went into it completely ignorant and like, what are we talking about here? What would you say to someone your definition of alchemy?
Oh my goodness. So the what is it? The short form, the blurb,
Yeah.
the the little meme, the sound bite
Yes.
of alchemy is that it is the spiritual science of transformation. And we do tend to focus on the transformation of lead to gold. Um, but interestingly, it actually has its roots. I don't even think that's where, I'm not even sure, to tell you the truth, where that became the focus. Perhaps more sort of Dark Ages medieval is when
Mhm.
the focus of the lead into gold. But previous to that, and again, the genesis of alchemy, as with so many of these things, is lost to the mists of time. But as far as we can somewhat get our feet on solid ground, it goes back to Egypt. And the Egyptians were not so much concerned, as far as I understand, with turning lead into gold. What they were concerned with was ensuring that the body would continue in the afterlife. That how do we turn matter into something which has spiritual constancy? So, so the term it's alchemy itself, the word itself means Egypt. In Arabic, alchem means the black land. Egypt was the black land because of the banks of the Nile, which flooded, right, with the inundation. So alchemy, like embedded in it, means Egypt.
Okay. Okay. That's
So it,
much more. Yeah, that makes sense. And actually, in the story of the alchemist, in the it tells it kind of like as a journey, as a story of this young boy. And um, I think that was kind of the author's way of presenting this idea when the Englishman comes to the alchemist in the oasis in the desert, looking for all the answers. He's brought all these books. He's studied his whole life. They've got their burners and their lab materials, and he finally gets there after all this journey, and he's talking to the alchemist, and he goes, how do I turn lead into gold? Or like, teach me what alchemy is, or teach me what you know. And the alchemist says, well, have you tried? So the Englishman's back in his tent with his little burner, and he's just like, and the boy in the story who's actually learning alchemy, the actual, transformation part of it, walks past his tent as he's over there hunched over his burner trying to like do his science, and he's like, what's he doing? I don't know. I think that was the point of the story where it was like, did some people get lost on the idea that like looking for treasure in gold was not in a literal sense?
Yeah, well, interestingly, so the Egyptians were, oh, there's so much. The Egyptians were the first, as far as I understand, who started to master metallurgy, right? So they were working with techniques, were working with like what gold and silver and copper, and so there was a sense of not so much transmuting lead into gold, but how do you work with these substances? What is it, like bronze is bronze like copper and tin, and it becomes stronger. So you put things together, you take things apart, you put things together, and they become stronger. So there's an aspect perhaps of the lead into gold which comes a little bit out of that. Also, aromatherapy which again has working with essential oils, has its roots in ancient Egypt as well. And that's a form of alchemy. You distill and you distill and you distill. What is it? It takes like 1,000 rose petals to get one drop of essential oil. That's an
Oh.
alchemical process. How do you take something and you distill it down to its purest form, its essential form, its essence form? So there's the metallurgy part of it. There's the plant part of it. There's I never pronounce it right. I think it's called spagyrix or something like that, which is like making herbal tinctures, which is again an alchemical process. Again, distilling it down into something which is a healing tincture. And getting back to the sort of first point that I was making, which was embalming. The Egyptians, for them, with the embalming of the pharaohs was an alchemical process, because what they did was they took out what is it? The heart, the liver, the stomach, something else. There was like the lungs, the 4 parts that were taken out, put in the Coptic jars, and then different things were put in. So you separate, and then you put back together, and in that process, what has been put back together has been changed into something which is a purer form than what it was before. So you do that continually. You are moving closer and closer and closer to essence. You are moving closer to spirit. So there certainly was that sense of working with it in the natural world. There's a term of, which, I mean, you read about alchemy for 3 seconds and you're going to trip across the name Hermes Trismegistus, which means the thrice great Hermes. There's some aspects of that which are reflected as there might have been 3 sort of iterations of this Hermes Trismegistus. Thoth, the pharaoh Akhenaten, and then this guy who was a contemporary of Jesus, fascinating to explore, Balinas, who healed the sick, raised the dead, but he was working with the Emerald Tablet, which are the teachings of alchemy. So there's that aspect, which could be the Hermes Trismegistus, but it's also this sense of this teacher of alchemy is thrice great because he knows the teachings of philosophy and of astrology, and of theurgy, of ritual. So how you bring all of these energies are about how do you bring spirit and matter together. That the heavens and the earth are in direct reflection to each other. The above and the below are in direct connection with each other. And so how do you start to work with the pharaoh who walks on earth, who is embalmed, becomes spiritualized and immortalized in the other world. And so there's always this relationship between the above and the below of spirit and matter, and the relationship between the two. And so one of the things, and that was when I say it's the spiritual science of transformation, it's how do you work on matter in a way to move it perhaps a closer reflection to its true spiritual nature, and that there are techniques for doing this. So how is all of that? So, but there's a few different directions to go.
Yeah, that's perfect. I mean, just in outlining, when I asked you about like, hey, if I want to start reading up on this to kind of get an idea of what we're talking about today, you referenced the Emerald Tablet, Alchemy for Personal Transformation, and I'll put this in my blog notes, with the episode as well, along with your books and courses. But I began to, read it, and talks about the history of Balinese and Hermes and the three forms of Hermes, and uh, yeah, really fascinating to in the comparisons of the stories of Jesus and the stories of Balinese. I mean, how much comparison there is there. And I think to myself, all of these ascended masters that you read about, all of these people that have achieved a sort of enlightenment, which I think is an alchemical transformation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's so interesting how I see this thread through all of these teachings that maybe called different things or given different associations with healing or with the ego versus the higher self. Um, but a lot of them will go through these transformations, and they, release all worldly possessions. They spend much of their time in meditation. They might travel and teach, and it's almost like a complete shedding of the ego to be walking around on the earth in this transcended form. Um,
Mm-hmm.
when I read that, I'm often like, oh my gosh, I could do that. I could just leave everything and walk around, and I want to be in a zen state. I want to be in a state of mind where I'm transformed into this enlightened being. And then my kid loses his sock and I'm back in my ego. Just like that. And so it begs the question, are there people like meant to born to serve that purpose, or is it something that we can achieve maybe in moments of our lives? What do you think about that?
Well, I do think that the progress of history also plays a part, and how I would have walked through the world 3,000 years ago is a little bit different than how I walk through the world now. And so, looking at some of these ascended masters, through the lens of geography and history is also important, because we're living in different times. And so the way in which we reflect, I do believe that it's possible to attain the philosopher's stone. That really is, ultimately where alchemy sort of got to. There's all of these different ways that it reflected, but the way that it sort of comes to us now is this, we're seeking the philosopher's stone. We are seeking the gold within. It's also looking at like from coal to diamond. What is the thing inside of me that is immutable, that
Mm.
that cannot be destroyed no matter what circumstance? And not that, yes, there can be a moment when, all right, the sock kind of tipped the scales for a second, but but then I found my center again.
We're
you know
human, as
we're
well.
human.
Yeah,
I think
it's part.
what, for me, because my entire career has been, and to a large degree my entire life, because I really started reading this stuff when I was probably way too young, um, is psychology,
Mm.
psychotherapy. I was reading transactional analysis when I was like 10 years old, 12 years old, because I was, given TA for teens. Um, so this seeking self has always been a part of what the ways that we lose ourselves. I remember reading like Sarah T. Portrait of a Teenage Alcoholic, which is, we lose ourselves to shadow, we lose ourselves to pain, we lose ourselves to addiction, we lose ourselves to a whole bunch of things.
Mhm.
And that is lead. That is lead.
Yes.
So this
Ooh.
alchemical transmutation is the way in which life will crack us upon the shores. When we are in lead, we will be cracked open by something. And that is the dark night of the soul. That is the first stage of alchemy. It is calcination. It is the tower in the tarot. It is feeling like the rug has been pulled out from under my feet and the walls have come crashing down around me and I don't know where to go next. And alchemy says, oh, I know what the next step is. And not only that, I know where all the steps lead. Where they lead is to the philosopher's stone. It is to the truth of yourself that has always been there. It got lost under the lead, but it's always been there. This is what's beautiful. It's not turning something into something else. It's not, it's within it.
It's already there.
The transformation comes from within. You know, the truth of who you are, the essence of who you are, you are not the you that got irritated about a sock. That's not who you are. That's just something that happened in a moment. The truth of who you are is the soul that shines through. And once you know that, you can come back to it so quickly.
Mm.
And I believe that is possible in the world today. You don't have to be in a monastery or walk the desert or let go of all your worldly goods to do it. Because ultimately, I think alchemy says that stuff, it doesn't matter anyways, whether you have it or you don't have it. I mean, it can make life a little more comfortable to be able to go into your home and go into your bed at night than to try to find a tree in the desert.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't inform who you are. It's your essence that informs who you are.
Okay. Yeah. And I think it was really powerful in reading about how much, and a lot of people are more and more familiar with the phrase as above, so below.
Right.
And the balance. It talks about like the yin and the yang and I have this Gaia deck that shows balance or the yin yang,
Oh, yeah.
the light, the dark, and
But this
together.
is yes, but this is what I find so interesting is that it's not the above and the below. When I said when two things come together, both of them are forever changed. It's not the above and the below. It's the heart that lies between them both. Alchemy, the philosopher's stone, is the intelligence of the heart. It's the middle. In the yin yang, it's the line that touches both of them.
Okay. I love that. And I love how it was describing it said as above so below, but as below so above. It's that sometimes people miss that it's the together. Like it's the both, right?
That's
because
right.
I think sometimes people are so a lot of times in the healing world and some of the healing work that I do, people call themselves light workers, or they'll say, not sure how I'm describing this exactly, but, turning towards the light. What I think sometimes gets missed or what needs to be addressed is that there's not a good and a bad about any of it. That there's not a light is good, shadows are bad, and that's why I love the metaphor or the address of it being led, because when I talk to children about their emotional energy and how it feels in their body, I'll say there's heavy feelings. There's feelings that can feel heavy, and transmuting them into light feelings makes you feel better. But there isn't such a thing as a good feeling or a bad feeling or an emotional energy that's good or bad. And helping kind of change the mentality about that, which I like. And And I like when they talk about, I heard somebody talking about it and they said, as above, so below, as within, so without.
That's right.
That our environment and then the within, they're reflections of each other as well.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And getting back to Math and Gwydion, they are reflections of each other. But if we change what's within, then we impact what's without as well, right? I can't necessarily change what's out there, but I can work what's in here. And what I find is that it's not that I'm changing what's out there, but I certainly change my perspective to what's out there, which changes how I respond to what's out there, which then will change what's out there. There
Yes.
is with one of the things I've been talking about this a lot. I actually just came out of a class where I was teaching about it. That very much what you were saying. They're not, emotions are not good or bad. However, there are emotions that are informed by shame. And shame is led, that we all carry. Shame is inadequacy, insecurity, not being good enough, not being lovable, that there's something wrong with us, that we're flawed, that, we're a mistake. Like, that is shame. And shame is epidemic. Everybody has it. And we don't really talk about it. But what is being transmuted is our shame. We cannot come from a place of essence when we are carrying this sense of inadequacy and not being good enough. And so, and we can't even listen to our emotions can be tainted by shame. If I'm feeling angry, then this is where, so I've actually, I'm not really using the light worker language. I've started using the language of being a wonder worker. As a wonder worker, it is seeing this interplay, the weave of the light and the dark, like the wheel of the year, right?
Yeah.
Winter is no better or worse than some. They just are. As long as there's no overlay of shame, there cannot be shame. The shame that tells us there's something wrong with me, that I'm separate, different, not unique, and that wonderful shining diamond, but that I'm flawed and rejectable. That's the thing which is dangerous. And the Philosopher's Stone is, when I say the thing in us that can never be changed, it's that I am a reflection of spirit on earth. That I am as above, spirit as below, spirit and the matter that is made up of the energy of all. So that's that immutability. There's no shame. There's no separation. We're all part of the all.
Yes. And it's making me realize, for those of listeners who've listened to other episodes, we've talked about how shame holds in the body and it being the lowest frequency of emotional energy that you can have in your body. But that it can show up in so many physical ways when we're holding shame. For me, for a lot of people, digestive issues, skin picking, having skin issues. When I started doing IPT processing, that's the energy healing modality that I use with clients, is that I'm realizing that process, doing sessions with clients, is sort of an alchemical process. We're taking apart that energy. We're taking it apart so that we can, it's that process of keep transmuting it, or I can't remember the word that you use, but when you're boiling it down and you're boiling it down into the essence of it, that's what I think that IPT process does, or had done for me, for sure. I did 20 or 30 processes during the year that I was going to school, learning how to do it. And I can tell you cut right through the shame, right into the heart of, like, what are the things keeping you stuck in those thoughts, in those emotions, in that energy. that you can just keep taking apart and keep taking apart and keep taking apart until you come down to the very essence of who you are.
And that is alchemy. That is exactly alchemy. The one thing that that I've started to reflect, and it's just sort of a nuance of language, but again, I've been working a number of years. I find that it can be an important distinction. I I don't I don't call shame an emotion anymore.
Oh, okay.
I refer to shame as a reflection of the relationship to self.
Okay.
I will either be in shame or I will be in essence. And if I am in shame, then my entire emotional spectrum is going to be reflected through that shame. So, my anger is rage, my sadness is despair, my
Okay.
my hurt is helplessness. It's everything is coming from this lens of inadequacy and disempowerment. So I
Yeah.
can't even listen to what the emotion is saying because all I hear is the shame.
Ah, yes.
When I am in essence, like that's really when I'm able to hear, like, there's no good or bad emotions. There are uncomfortable ones. There are ones
Yeah.
that may be a little more challenging in what they have to say, but they're not reflective of my worth. Shame is always a message about your worth.
Yes. Yes.
So emotions are giving us information about the world, which is really important for me because then I can use those emotions to tell me, how I need to respond to the world. Shame is never telling me anything about the world. It is only telling me something about myself.
Yeah. Oh, it's almost like glasses you put on. If you were
That,
using visual sense, it would be like
yeah,
I see everything through the lens of this shame,
that's right.
like complete helplessness, and I don't have any power. I don't have any control.
Yeah,
And you can't truly see things for the way that they are. You can't see truth.
yeah. And so alchemy, I would say alchemy is it's a spiritual science because it has steps. It's got protocols as well for addressing shame so that you're able to uncover and like to reveal to oneself the philosopher's stone, the essence, the truth of who you are. So any of these, there's a lot of different ways of doing it, but yeah, they're alchemical processes because they're bringing you to that place.
Nice. Yeah.
It's profound work. And what I would say, just as just a little thing, there was a time when this is what science was, but it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't until the Middle Ages when, the rise, where science and religion had to separate. So one of the things that I find fascinating, Isaac Newton, right, who is the father of physics, he was an alchemist. He
Mm-hmm.
wrote so many alchemical texts, but he was told, you reject those or else.
Yeah.
So he rejected. So astrology became astronomy. Alchemy became chemistry.
Uh-huh.
Everything lost its spiritual component and it just became hard science.
Interesting. Yeah, that's
Isn't
fascinating.
it?
Because, I mean, I will just put it out there for those listening and wondering why. Why would that happen? Think about political power and about how it would really serve the powers of man and authority figures of the time to have people separated from that message, from that looking at the world in that way.
Well, and that's it. that is the key word, separation.
Mm-hmm.
I am separated from spirit unless I go through this route, right?
Yes.
So when I'm separated from spirit, that's when shame gets in there.
And I found this really fascinating too, that so many different contexts of other spiritual endeavors. I mean, whether you look at like different places around the world, all have kind of their own language for this same idea. When I first kind of started divvying from the, let's say, dogma of my own upbringing, I started looking into the Gnostic Gospels of Mary Magdalene and that, and talking about the new or the heart, what did they call it? Mind of the heart of the mind. Can't remember how they, hearts.
There's the heart.
But I kind of drew it as a triangle with the eye in the middle of the, like, between the things, between the mind, body, and soul. You have when the mind and the heart are working together, there's this place where they meet, and that's the heart, the
Which is
that the spirit knew.
yeah, and this is the thing that I find really, really, really fascinating with certainly early on in my career and realizing that, sort of the holistic approach is mind, body, spirit, it's mind, body, spirit, it's mind, body, spirit. And where I was coming from as a psychotherapist, I'm like, where are the emotions? It's not mind, body, spirit. It's body, emotions, mind, and spirit. It's mind, body, spirit, emotions, mind, body, spirit, emotions, mind, body, spirit. And it's the emotions, it's the heart that is at the center. And we talk about the mind, body, spirit connection, and we never put the emotions in there. And the emotions are the energy that is the conduit between me and the world. That is my information highway.
Yes. Oh yeah, I like that image. I'm really big on metaphors. I don't know if you can tell, but when like I think of like, okay, this is like a highway. These are like glasses. I mean, that just helps me understand the concept. And I always teach, whether I'm teaching the kids or when I'm teaching one of my courses, I use color as the energy of emotions, and I'll say it's emotion, energy in motion. So you're getting you're in contact, which is why I absolutely agree with you that shame shouldn't even be classified in that. It's almost like the lens in which we see those emotions through.
It is the lens,
and that's fantastic. I'm so excited about that. I'm like, yes, that makes more sense to me. And how we think of it
changes everything. It changes the dynamic. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Because in an IPT process, when I'm working with a client, we will move emotions at like energy. I'll say, pull that out in a color and let's look at what it looks like. And that gives us information. But I will say, okay, now in all of those emotions, all of those things that you maybe were experiencing at this point in time, what was the belief? What belief you have? And that is the shame. And it's almost always one of three things. I think or feel I'm not good enough. I think or feel I'm not worthy, or I think or feel I'm not lovable. Yes. And those are all of the things that you just said. So
they're all shame. They're shame. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, so I'm wondering, I pulled this other card from the Gaia deck earlier when I was kind of looking at just imagery. And this one came up, which does have some Egyptian symbols in this. It's the hidden path.
Right.
And I see like the disc of the sun and the eye, and I'm
for us.
And I'm wondering, is this kind of in the alchemical transformation when you're going to reveal the self, the philosopher's stone, it sort of opens up that path or purpose. So when you're in a state of confusion, when the dark night of the soul happens and you're in a state of confusion, I always tell clients, confusion is hard. That's a really painful place to be. but it's actually a really positive step because you need the confusion to be open to something new.
Hmm.
And do you feel like that sort of reveals then your path forward?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There is some, one of the wisdoms I find that certainly comes out of an alchemical approach is that we are not meant to be directed by what our minds think. We are meant to be directed by what draws the heart forward. And the mind is meant to be in service to that. The mind, like, what does, it's not just, oh, what do I want? But what does calm my heart? And it's not my brain's job to say, well, that doesn't make any sense. Well, that's never going to happen. Well, you don't have this, you can't do, like, because that separates us again, right? That can create shame. But to say, okay, how can we move forward with that? How can I be of service to that? How can I support that? And there's going to need to be some discernment.
Mm.
But this is where the eye and the heart are the sun and the eye in that card are on
Yeah.
either side.
Oh, yeah.
That there is this, what is the light that draws me forward? What is the discernment? How can I sort of bring my mind to help me see the path? But what's in the center of that? What rests in the heart? That's the Ankh. That is the symbol of everlasting life. And part of recognizing that when we live from the heart, when we live from essence, we may be here for a short time, we may be here for a long time. The truth is, we are indestructible. We will be matter, and then we will be spirit. For some people, they believe then we will be matter again. And that's the thing. It's not where we're getting to that is the important thing. It's how we engage from a place of heart in all of those moments. And I think that's that sort of hidden path is
Yeah.
that I'm always where I need to be. I'm always exactly where I need to be, whether I'm here for another week or another 20 years. This is the moment that counts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which,
And that for me, that is what wonder work is about. Where
mm,
I can pay attention to the human. I can pay attention to the spirit, and I see that they are always in dialogue with each other.
yeah. Yeah. It's very helpful to know that that's possible, and especially when um you go through moments of life like the dark night of the soul, or what I sometimes refer to as mini deaths of
Yeah.
life throughout your life, like where you're going, a part of me has had to die in order for a rebirth to occur and to um,
Yeah.
allow for my body and spirit to befriend each other again. That when it feels like they're at war or at odds, there's a separation, or that there needs to be a reconciliation for this rebirth.
Yeah. It's interesting because you were talking about confusion, and I recognize it's a not uncommon experience for many, many, many people to have. Again, increasingly, I am coming to a place where my sense is confusion doesn't happen when we drop into our bodies. Our bodies are never confused.
Hmm.
It's when our heads are trying to have authority over our bodies.
Yeah.
that we get
Sure.
confused. It's that battle between head and heart that leads to
Yeah.
confusion.
Yeah. Yeah. So who are you listening to and who's has the authority?
Yeah. And again, this brings us to the Chariot card. It's not saying that, oh, what I want is the only thing that matters. Both of the horses
Yeah.
have got to be pulling the chariot
One direction.
together.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it can sometimes feel like they're dressed not. That can be it can be a moment in a day, it can be a period of time, and recognizing that that happens to us all
Yeah.
is important
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, fascinating. I think this is full circle. What is it? Is there anything else that's in work with alchemy or in the healing spiritual transformation seekers out there? Anything else you would have them know? A final thought that we haven't touched on?
Well, there was something that you said about healing, and again, there's certain things. Even I would say. So the book that I have that's coming out in May, I do put a lot of this. I don't talk about alchemy per se, but everything in there really is about this process of coming back to truth and essence, um, and very much through a grieving process is why I talk about death. I talk about the books of the dead. I talk about psychopomps. Psychopomps to me are the ones who know how to navigate this whole in between space, because that's what they do. They traverse the liminal. But what I've come to really recognize is that all healing is grieving. We need to know how to grieve. Because in healing, I have to grieve the me that I am no longer.
Yes.
To come
Yeah.
back into wholeness, I need to grieve the things that created the fragmentation. All healing is grieving, and we don't know how to grieve.
No. Yes. I am so excited. I decided to do an episode of this podcast on death and grieving specifically, but I'm waiting for your book. And I'm also watching the series that Christopher Hughes did on the
Oh, Maru Gira Chris.
yes, Maru Gira.
Gira Chris.
See, 400 something days on Duolingo and I still can't do it. What? I'll work on it. I'll practice for the next one. But I do want to prepare for. I am I'm married into a family that is no stranger to death and grief, and yet almost as an observant person on the outside of it, just seeing how cultures do grief differently, and how even some situations where certain people have had to grieve and have experienced a lot of death in the family, maybe even still don't know how to grieve because culturally we haven't been taught or shown how or what it even is. And it's such a different kind of suffering and pain than that of maybe confusion or emotional suffering that we can have. Yeah. So I am going to that. Stay tuned, audience, for that. I'm going to dive more into that for sure.
There's so much. There's so much. One thing, and I know that we probably could talk all night. I will say that, and this is another. It's where aspects of the alchemical journey, may flow over into a little bit of the Grail mysteries, which is a whole other thing to talk about. It's a little bit perhaps of where, we really have in our culture, we focus so much on the head and the cognitive and the evidence-based, like all of that. And again, there's a place for that, but it's not all there is. That when somebody is grieving, we have a tendency to go in with, okay, well, like these are the stages and this is what to look for and this is what you need to say. And what we don't say is, what do you need? How can I be of service? You know, we don't reach with the heart. We try to come in with the answers instead of just saying, I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think, again, coming back to alchemy, the heart knows that's the boy going like, oh, there's the crazy Englishman with all his things, where you just need to be present.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the lesson that ultimately the Englishman will learn in the story. It doesn't touch back in with Englishman in the story. I don't find out what happens to him. But the alchemist says something like he will get there. Right? Like he's working on his part. And even in just the effort of physically working on the metals, and he's going to get what he needs to learn from it.
Right.
Just as we all do in our roundabout ways.
We do. It's all our individual journey, right?
Yes. All right. Are you ready?
I have here the Philosopher's Stones. Can you see that there?
Yes.
Which I absolutely adore. I believe they're out of print. They're impossible to find. But so it's a little bag of stones.
I love it.
Oh.
Oh yeah. The circle with this okay, for those who aren't watching on YouTube, the circle with the dot in the center.
A dot. So that is the symbol for gold.
Mm-hmm.
So this whole journey culminates, right, from lead to gold, and we have attained the gold. We've stirred and stirred and stirred and stirred.
From our Gwydion and math in the cauldron symbol at the beginning until now, we've stirred up a lot, and we've learned a lot about, for those who were like me, just going, what even is this alchemy thing? What do people keep talking about? Is it literal science, or are we? And yes, it is a little bit of both. It's a little bit of all things. And I mean, we could only touch on what we had time to touch on today. So
yeah, we didn't even talk about the stages and, you know, the science part of it. Like, these are the things emotionally even to look at, you know. So there's, but it gives a doorway in. And I love this. It's like the message is find your light and let it shine.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm going to keep reading the Emerald Tablet. I'm going to read your book when it comes in and give people a little bit more of what comes from studying the Emerald Tablet and the principles or the rubrics there. So we can touch back on it in future episodes. But thank you so much for this time you spent with us and to kind of give us a really good idea of what we're looking at. And just for anybody wanting to find out more of what Tiffany has going on, she offers many courses through Soul Alchemist Academy, including Empowerment Path, the Enlightenment Path, and the Liminal Path, and two year-long programs. I'm very personally interested in these, by the way. So the Great Work Weekly Study Group, coming back after a 2-year hiatus. Yeah. Yay!
Yeah.
So for those of you who are jumping on, this is a great time to do it.
Yeah, and I do touch on alchemy in that as well, because so part of what I've done in both the Great Work and the Noble Art is I have looked at the wheel of the year, and I see the wheel of the year is a reflection of the entire alchemical process. So that journey through, whether you're doing it through the books or whether, I am excited to do these weekly things to just help people be on track.
Right. Yes.
And the whole journey is it's a year-long alchemical journey. Yeah.
Fantastic. That is something I'm very interested in, because I've been working with clients on like Jenna's book, the Babylonian Cycles of Healing.
Right.
And have been able to kind of partner it with all of those cycles are in an IPT process. So when a client comes to me for that, we're going through an entire process in an hour and a half. Then if they do like a course, which is the full moon, the month, we get to do the mythic moons, all of those cycles. And I'm sure the alchemical process you're talking about throughout the year, I mean, it probably all falls right in line. It's probably the same process in different ways.
Different focus, different language, slightly different. The truth is I started writing the great work. Then I found Avalon Within. I was like, okay, well, forget that. So I shelved it. And it was Jenna who was like, would you just write your book?
Yes.
Because it's a different system.
And that's just the thing. We need all of it. I mean, so many things resonate with so many different people in different times of their life. And and I think we tend to do that sometimes, where we think like, oh, they compete with each other, but really they all
they enhance.
Thread together like this giant web of, I don't know, beauty, information.
And it's funny because I have found with Jenna, so then we went off, we wrote, didn't even know each other, writing books, and then we come around, oh darn. Again, very similar themes, but totally different books, right? So
you guys are same wavelength, and you're downloading the same things at the same time, and it just means you are meant to be connected.
Yeah.
And that's great. So can you let us know how we can find you and those courses when we want to be in the loop of what you've got going on?
So both of those now, they're my website, which is just www.tiffanylazic.com. I do have those courses. Well, the one of them is group therapy. So it's a year-long process of group therapy, which I do in alignment with the cycle of the seasons, which was a bit of an experiment 2 years ago, but it's so powerful. Having done it like for a whole year, the changes are remarkable. So that's under psychotherapy, but under the academy, there's a place that says additional courses or other courses, and that's where the Great Work Weekly Study group is.
Okay, so good. And I post links to that on the blog for the show notes for this episode. So anybody listening right now who's like, how do I find this? I will get the link and I'll put it on that blog post. So you can find that on prism-healing.com, my website. And at the top, there's a tab that says blog. My blog is all the episodes of Practically Magick there. So come and find me. Go find Tiffany. We'll provide you with all the things you need to become an alchemist and achieve your own transformation.
And let your light shine.
Yes. So go make magic, witches and wizards. We'll see you next time.